Welcome to Reintroducing the Art of Conversation. I haven't done one of these in quite a while, but no better person to kick off 2022 with than a European Movement Ireland team member. We have Lisa Nic of Bhreithimh, and I was practicing before we came on, Lisa, and I hope I captured. For anybody non-Irish speaking, the surname is Judge in English, but she goes by the full name, celebrating all things Irish, particularly now, as it is an official language of our EU. Lisa Nic of Bhreithimh. Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong there. Did I make a dog's
You're
dinner
not
as
wrong
I
at all.
promised
That
I would
was
not?
spot on, Ria. Spot on.
Well, let me give a little formal introduction to who Lisa is, and all the hard work she does on all Irish citizens in our European Union. So, works as head of communications and education at European Movement Ireland. So you'll hear probably EMI said throughout. It's a short term for it, so European Movement Ireland. Shout out if you are not following them on any form of social media, you should. There is amazing nuggets on a daily, if not weekly basis about what is happening in our European Union and really where Ireland is and the impact that they're making on an EU front. European Movement Ireland's mission is to develop the connection between our country and Europe, and to really achieve greater public understanding of what the European Union does for us, and ultimately what we do within the European Union. Lisa is the driving force behind this mission and leads on press engagement, in particular on Irish language communications and education youth engagement programs. And given the fact that we're in the EU Year of Youth and also the Conference on the Future of Europe, Lisa, I want to applaud you from a virtual distance to say you couldn't have combined two more intense years into 1 year. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what EMI are doing, what you're excited about, and how we can connect and support you. Outside of EMI, Lisa managed communications as part of Gael Earn Sun Roiga, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Irish language branch of Together for Yes referendum campaign, and the Irish language branch of the 2015 Yes Equality referendum campaign. So we'll definitely get a question there, Lisa, in terms of all our Gaelic speakers, or those that are really interested in languages or new to the Ireland as a whole in European Union, wants to explore the Irish language and can do it through the political lens like a referendum. I think that is pretty, that's wicked. Initiatives like the Conference on the Future of Europe the past year has been a benchmark for revisiting the European connection, not just in Ireland, of course, but across the European Union. Bridging the gap is something for anybody who has been connecting to Reintroducing the Art of Conversation a few times over would know how that disconnect and how we can shorten, if not deplete, that disconnect is something that my team and I and many of our guests on Reintroducing have openly discussed. There is one, I think it's important to be aware of it, and how we fix it is through collective conversation and awareness. An awareness building and signposting like this conversation here with EMI and Lisa, who's the spearhead of it. I'm delighted to enlist the expertise of Lisa to really develop deeper understanding into the effective communication world too, given that's her job of many jobs. And with that very short and hopefully not too formal introduction, Lisa, I'm delighted to have you on, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for the invite, and I'm delighted with that new title, the spearhead of EM Ireland. I'm going to tell my colleagues that. I'm glad they're not here to disagree. There are so many spearheads, but I do have a
love for Bear Boy, for Kieran. He's a little piece of my heart, and no better man in the news in the last couple of weeks, with Cork being at the centre of diplomacy. So I could only imagine him in the office right now. But for you...
Great excitement around fisheries, yeah, great excitement.
Yeah. For you, tell me, did I miss anything? Did I leave anything out, Lisa, in terms of a bio? Because I think sometimes, it takes a lot of work to get the head of communications of anything. particularly European Movement Ireland, considering it is a leading expert in the European connection and fixing that disconnect. But from your words, what it is that you do on a daily basis to make the European Union and ourselves here in Ireland form a better and stronger relationship.
Yeah, so like a lot of our roles in European Movement Ireland and indeed in NGOs and different organisations, it's really, really very dynamic kind of work. It's changed up hugely in the past 2 years of the pandemic. My work, as you say, and as you correctly sort of defined there, Maria, was it focuses on sort of two elements, the communication side of things. So thank you for complimenting our social media. We do a huge amount of work online. And then, of course, media engagement and ensuring that stories about Europe are shared in media in Ireland. And then there's the education side of things, which has become a really significant part of our work. I know you know well the Blue Star programme that we do with young people around Ireland to teach them more about the EU and Europe. And our MEPs are great to always engage with the kids and go out to schools or meet them online as part of that. So as well as that, I manage our College of Europe promotional programme and sort of encouraging young people to apply to the College of Europe and take masters in European studies. And that's just a flavour, I suppose, of the education and the communications work that we do. But a huge amount there, and it's constantly changing, and evolving. And I think it has to kind of reflect what Irish people are looking for from the EU and from us as an NGO working on European affairs,
Yeah, and I think I love, and I've always said this, and not just because we're connected online here, but your EMI's relationship with education and communication is really strong. So in order, and I don't mean that in an offhanded comment, it's in order to change and break perhaps a broken cycle of communication up to for over the last number of years. Education has to be at the center of that conversation, and the fact that it is starting at a younger age, like through Brew Schools, and as if any teacher or any parent is listening and is questioning what is the Blue Schools program, you might just give a little shout out about that, because for me as a young politician, and for you all working so hard at EMI, there is so many programs out there. Blue Schools is to me at the heart of everything, because when you have conversations at such a young age, seeds get planted. You never know when they'll spring. You never know if they'll spring. But the fact that there's access to education, and the fact that younger people in our primary schools get to explore and look at what the European Union is and where we've come into it as a country, and the fact that our classrooms now are so much richer in culture. It's so diverse. Even my own national school here in Truro, I speaking to one of the teachers there quite recently, there's like 32 different nationalities throughout the school. When I was growing up, my siblings and I were the only non-Irish, because we had come in from America. And now you have a richness, and the Blue Schools kind of tied in together for younger people to really understand how culture is so important, and I'd love to give a little shout out to all the work that you guys are doing there, and maybe, as I said, chat a little bit just for a moment or two about what this Blue Schools is and how people can get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give a shout out to my colleagues, Ryan Levis and Elizabeth Moody, who manage our Blue Star programme. I come in on the Irish language side of it, Maria, and the communication side of it. So dealing with press around the Blue Star programme and translating all of our resources to Irish. So we offer the programme bilingually, so Gail Scullina can take part. And I think that's a really important one. I know from friends who would teach Irish to know that there's this resource, there's this programme you can do in full through Irish. But yeah, Ryan and Elizabeth deserve serious praise, I think, for many years of such a fantastic programme that, of course, they run on behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs and have done for a good number of years, engaging with schools right across the country. Every county, usually we have registered each year schools in every county across the country. And, as you said there, Maria, I think people will often come to us. I remember meeting an Italian student and somebody from another country across Europe, and they always say to us, I wish I'd had that program when I was in school. And so much of that we can kind of say, and particularly around Europe. And indeed, there's been lots in the media in the last few months about this. Brian Mooney wrote about it, and Barbara from the Commission as well was speaking about it. It's that idea of the importance of teaching about Europe and the EU and its value in our lives from a young age. And then that second piece that's so important that you mentioned, the diversity in our classrooms now with regard to the backgrounds of the kids. It's so important, I think, to engage on each other's cultures, and the Blue Star program gives a real space for that. So people might think, oh, this is just teaching the kids about the European institutions, and it's absolutely not. The beauty of the Blue Star program is we and the Commission and the Parliament and the government provide resources, and the teachers themselves decide what is most appropriate for their class, what works for them, what fits into what they're already teaching, and it complements the curriculum that they're already teaching. But we have heard such heartwarming, lovely stories of, one of the kids coming in with, let's say, his grandmother's Slovakian cookie bake or something like that. I can't remember the exact anecdote. Ryan is the best for these anecdotes, but he then taught the whole class how to bake this thing that his granny had baked. And that gives those kids that little bit more understanding of each other, of his background. He isn't this other from another country. He is one of their peers, and his granny bakes cookies just in the same way that their granny might bake cookies. And it's such a simple thing, but I think it really fosters that understanding. Like, understanding is the key to breaking down those barriers between us, and really ultimately to fighting things like xenophobia, racism. So I think the Blue Star program, it punches well above its weight. It's really so broad across the country, and as you say, the Irish MEPs have been fantastic over the years as well for engaging as part of that. And that's so important, that the kids again see firsthand. They're either meeting you in a classroom or online. They see, this is an MEP, they represent me in the European Parliament, they're a politician like the politicians in the Dáil Éireann, and this is what they do. And they can ask questions of the MEPs. I think that's one of the best bits, and we've heard hilarious stories, of the questions that are asked.
Some of the hardest interviews, Lisa, have come from the Blue Scar programme. Yeah. I get asked, will Mayo ever win the All-Ireland, which is probably one of the harshest questions to see a little face, and they're only taunting you. It's not one of but before I go off track, which I continuously do on these Reintroducing the Irish conversations because I get so engrossed, you made a point there in sharing the work you're doing on the Irish language, and I'd love to hear, from your take, because you've been working so hard, so tirelessly on that communication piece around our beautiful Irish language, and to the point of where we do have different cultures, but then how do we talk about and preserve our own and also grow our own? How difficult is it, be it as an Irish speaker and as someone in your role with EMI, to really engage Irish citizens on the language and then EU affairs as a whole?
Yeah, I suppose, with regard to Irish, that isn't our role at all, to re-engage. I am hugely positive about the steps that are being taken, particularly on an EU level, for the Irish language, the opportunity that's there for Irish speakers. So many of my friends have gone to Brussels, Strasbourg, they're seizing those opportunities. And I think sometimes around the Irish language, and this is more of personal experience that I've kind of brought into my work in EMI, there is, to be frank, Maria, a level of ignorance around the Irish language here in Ireland. And I've talked to friends in Brussels who say, it's so funny, it's such a different mindset here. Irish is just the same as any other language in the Union, and in their work, it isn't seen as different. Whereas in Ireland, there can be an ignorance around Irish and its value, and wondering, why do people study Irish? Why are there these jobs? And the point I think that they're missing is that there is a huge amount of opportunity for young people with Irish, and not just in the EU. right across the world. I taught Irish in the US for a year on a Fulbright scholarship, had one of the best experiences of my life. Every job that I have had to date, over 10 different positions, careers, internships, things like that, I have brought Irish into it, or they have been fully through Irish. And I truly believe the career path I'm on is because of Irish, even though my job is primarily in English now. So I think the language is so alive, it is thriving, it is breathing, and it is so alive among younger people, and that's so important. So the end of the derogation of Irish, and as you said earlier, Irish becoming a full official language of the EU, I think was such an important step to bolster that and to support all of these. And here in Dublin, largely very young people who are involved in the revival of Irish, and we've had numerous revivals over the years from people in Gaeltacht areas, from people in cities, towns, and it's really continuing, here. But as regards engaging people then on European affairs, look, I think levels of interest vary so much from week to week, from place to place in Ireland. And we can't just say one way or the other, as you know, Maria, that there's low interest or there's high interest in the EU, because very often I think in Ireland and in other countries too, it's based on what's happening in the EU. Like everybody was reading about the EU in Ireland for the last few years because of Brexit and the trade agreement. It's about what's in the news, what's current, what's important, and what issue affects their lives. And so we've found, huge amounts of engagement over the years in all of our deliberative democracy, citizens engagement events, the citizens dialogues, right through to the Conference on the Future of Europe now. We see people really interested, really wanting to have their voices heard. But I suppose it's important that we reach a diverse range of people, and that's something that's really important to us with our work on the conference. And we're hearing from all voices across Ireland, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, from the traveller community, the LGBT community, a little bit of everything. So we're really hearing the broad spectrum of Irish voices. And going back to what we said about the Blue Star programme and how multicultural Ireland is, that's important. And then from my experience, it's important that people see that there's action on those opinions. It isn't just feeding into a conversation about Europe, because we've all had so many conversations about Europe. There's actually action being taken. And I think we're really hopeful for that in the conference, because there's really been a promise to take what Irish people are saying as part of the conference and put it into place and in policies and so on and so forth. And then finally, I'd just say on sort of maybe bridging that information gap and that kind of thing. Something very simple we do, and something that we have a huge amount of engagement on, is putting out our Just the Facts explainers. And sometimes it's
these are brilliant.
Thanks so much, Bria. It's the simplest ones. Like one of the ones that did so well recently was, the title was, "What is Article 16?" And I think that is such a definition of what can be missing sometimes. People are obviously Googling and saying, what is Article 16? They come across our explainer. It's brief, it's to the point, it's in clear, understandable language, and they go from there. They learn so much from that. And so those explainers, those who's who in the EU, when Ursula von der Leyen was elected, who is Ursula von der Leyen, those ones are really sought after. And I think that tells us a lot about what people want from the EU and from organizations like ourselves working on European affairs. They want things broken down, sometimes simply, sometimes more complex, but they really do. They want those explainers and that kind of thing too. So we do a podcast series as well, and a number of other things to try and reach people through different media. But really, I think breaking it down and keeping it simple as well is important.
Which kind of leads me on to my next question. And to your point, the explainers are phenomenal, even for someone in politics and relatively new to politics. And I think there has to be, there's a space of learning for every person, particularly if you're in a new role. But even as an MEP, and I say this a lot to third level or secondary school kids in particular, that the European Union is large. There's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of movement of information. Disinformation in pockets of Europe is on the rise, unfortunately. So where you get your factual information is incredibly important from a reliable resource. And you all at EMI really fit fit that for so many, as an MEP and as a young person myself too, because sometimes you hear things, you do a quick search, Twitter tells you one thing, something else tells you another, and then you're spiraling into a rabbit hole of TikToks and YouTube, which doesn't provide information all the same, but where you're getting it from a resource and a reliable one, and the engagement piece is incredibly important, to your point. From an MEP standpoint, what is it that we can do to stimulate your work too, to support it, to further lengthen it? And I'd love to hear that. What's our Oberwalia from you all at EMI?
Well, I think, look, Irish MEPs have been doing the Oberwalia and more beyond that for years and years. And I think that's something that isn't always credited, is the tireless work that MEPs do. And when we come back to maybe media coverage in Ireland, sometimes, Noel, our CEO, has this phrase that we Europeanize failure and we nationalize success. And it's so true, that so often we see negative stories from Europe in the papers here in Ireland and the news. And I think more importantly, we need to focus on the great work that's being done by our MEPs and the commission and so on and so forth. We need to really celebrate that and talk about that more. So I think there's a lot of work being done, but as always, as I say, engaging in programs like the Blue Star program or NASC CSO, when we did last year on sort of civil society engagement, we had a huge amount of engagement from MEPs there, and indeed our colleagues in the European Parliament Liaison Office and the civil society organisations themselves. And that engagement and that, presence at meetings, at events, that really means a lot to people. I think people are always, I remember our last in-person event, Maria, before the pandemic, was actually with yourself and Vice President and the Commission, Dubravka Suica. I hope I got her name right.
Yeah.
But, in NUIG, and that was our last event in person. And I remember you had a queue of people coming up to talk to you at the end, and lots of young people, lots of people dealing with all sorts of challenges. So people really do want to engage and meet with their MEPs. So by being involved in these events with citizens, I think that's a huge way to support our work and your own work and all of that. And then, of course, sharing and disseminating the information and being a great promoter of our work, which, again, I think you're already doing, and we're delighted with that.
Yeah, well, I'm a big champion because I know behind the infographics sharing information, the fact that percentages of the pro-European model that we have, every time it gets asked and politicians pull, it's EMI resources that have gone into asking the hard questions from Irish people on how they feel being in the European Union. But I'd love, and you mentioned it there, and I skipped over it here on my questions by mistake, but NASCO campaign in 2021, civil society organizations, again, predominantly, I shouldn't say predominantly, but many are volunteer-led. And I'd love to hear your experience in your role and in representation of EMI, how that went in that campaign, because I think as we're coming out of the pandemic, more and more people are looking for that value add, and where they can put some volunteer hours or extra reading hours in, and to hear about that campaign, because I don't think it's not going to be the last, and I think it's just the iteration of what's to come too.
Absolutely. And look, we've engaged with civil society organisations in all of those different sort of events and engagements we've done over the years. And NASC CSO was just a fabulous opportunity to hone that down into the relationship between civil society organisations and the European Parliament. And the goal of the project was to develop and support those connections, and particularly between civil society organisations working on the ground in Ireland, as you say, many of them volunteer-led, and their elected Irish MEPs. And so we held a series of meetings across the country on a variety of topics, and then in the various European Parliament constituencies in Ireland. And we really, it was such a positive campaign, I have to say, Maria. It was probably the most positive and insightful experience that I have had working at EM Ireland for a number of years. There was such an amount of conversation, debate. I learned a lot, the MEPs learned a lot. Every MEP we had was scribbling down notes throughout, and it was really I really felt that it delivered on what it was supposed to do. And I know I'm maybe biased saying that, but I could see the level of engagement. And we had follow-ups from civil society organizations saying this was so helpful. And, I had a meeting with so-and-so MEP after it based on the connection we made there. And, I think there are so many connections already being, developed and worked on and whatever else. We weren't the first to do this by a mile, but we did invite, hundreds and hundreds of civil society organizations across the country. As you say, some of them volunteer-led, some of them were 1 or 2 staff members or only volunteers who maybe have never had a connection with the EU, and then some of them who have well-developed, established connections, have funding and so on and so forth. So there was a real diversity there, and I think that was the nice thing, that we brought in some of these organizations who'd never had a connection with their organization to the EU and helped them to develop new connections. So yeah, such a positive, insightful experience. And as you say, like, what a challenging 2 years for civil society organizations, and resourcing, staff, supports, all of these things, funding came up again and again and again across the country, across the spectrum of, the different sectors of civil society organizations. So I think, as you say, if people wish to volunteer for some of these great organizations, that's great. And then, of course, it's great that there are funding supports available through the European Union for these organizations, and indeed the government can continue to support them, because I really think they're going to need a lot of support in the years to come. That was a big takeaway for me, and really worried about the future in a lot of ways. But, people who work in these organizations, so proactive, engaged, they work so hard as well. So, I'd be so positive about civil society in Ireland and the future of it based on these people that we met. But they absolutely need the support and need, all of our support, I guess. So yeah, we look forward to now kind of continuing that civil society engagement, working with the Parliament Liaison Office in Ireland this year, maybe under a new guise, because the NASC CSO project came to an end. But yeah, I'd absolutely, if anyone is watching this and wants to engage and maybe hasn't ever engaged more than with yourself, Maria, we would encourage them to get in touch with us, and we can set up, those connections in whatever way they need, so they can contact us in usual ways, EuropeanMovement.ie and all the rest.
Yeah, to your point though, I think one of the phenomenal things for me at NASCSO was exactly as you said. I was watching relationships being formed from one side of the country to the other, and people didn't realize what was on their doorstep. As MEP, I didn't realize the breadth of different projects that were going on, and it was a real awakening to. At every corner of every facet, large town, small town, rural, urban, there is so much work going on, and then just how we support each other, particularly coming out of the pandemic, will be incredibly important as consumers that we all are in terms of information and whatnot. The requirement and the demand becomes so intense sometimes, and people are really looking for, I believe in speaking to my friends and family, they're looking for that where they can add value and make value in different organizations, and credit to you all for bringing everybody under the virtual roof for that. This is where I go really off on a tangent. So I have questions in front of me, and I keep going down the rabbit hole of asking you further questions. So I'm sorry about
Isn't that how a conversation goes, though?
It is. That's the beauty of it. Until then, people are watching this going, God, she really went on a tangent there. But you have spoken before about the importance of representation of women in politics. EMI is a big champion of it as a whole. And not just women in politics, but leadership, women online experience. What was the catalyst for speaking up on this? As we are, and I ask this with a little bit of a hope that anybody watching, be it knows a woman, is the woman, comes from a minority background, wants to see change, wants to get involved in the conversation table of change, be it as the candidate or behind the scenes, in supporting that person. Because sometimes I think when we talk about women getting in politics, you're like, well, I don't want to be on the campaign poster, but there's a slew of work work to be done behind the scenes also. But what for you is the catalyst of that change, speaking up for this?
Yeah, well, I've always been a feminist, and it's always been feminism has always been part of my professional life. And as you say, EMI, I do believe we're champions of it. Our CEO is a very successful woman, Noelle, and lots of people in senior positions on our board. Myself as head of communications, and I think that's important. Like that representation. Yourself as an MEP, Maria, for women and non-binary people to see that there are women in these positions, I can strive to that, and that they're being properly remunerated as they should be alongside men in those roles. So not just that they get the roles, but that they are remunerated in the way that they should be. So that representation piece is important. And then I think we have to have, such a broader conversation. And this is, as you say, the sort of catalyst and me being involved in what was an event with our colleagues in European Movement International. I spoke about women's experiences online, in politics and leadership, and sort of linked up with, one of your colleagues, MEP Silvia Spurek, and other great speakers from the European Women's Lobby. And we had a lot of conversation with this, and I learned a lot, and I think like anything, it's so dependent on where you are, on, everything right down to the town that you live in, not just the country that you live in. If you're in a city, your family, your background, and so on and so forth. So there's such a broad spectrum of experiences out there. But I think, as you say, sometimes women can be shy to put themselves forward, to be on the poster. But then much deeper than that, I think now we're starting to see much deeper levels in addition to that make me say, we have to ask ourselves, have we created a space where women can comfortably and positively come into the world of politics and leadership? Are they going to be supported? Are they going to be supported by other women, which is hugely important? We've heard such awful things from our Irish politicians in recent years about the sexual harassment, the stalking, the sexism, the online harassment that women experience far more than men, and I appreciate men experience this too, but not to the same degree, not to the same sort of sinister kind of ways that can be behind it. And that's such a problem, because what are we then sort of putting to young women? Are we portraying a career that they can be happy in, that they can have comfortable lives in? I know I read something about one of our TDs saying that, she had to keep changing the locks on her door. Like, that's not, to a young woman, a career that she can say, oh, that sounds fun, let's be frank about it. So I think we have a lot of work to do until there's true equality in politics, until the quotas are filled, and until women feel comfortable, safe, and supported going into politics. I think we all have a lot of work to do in every area of society. And we'll be so much better for it if there is that representation of all genders in our leadership, in our politics. Things will be better. And research shows this, it isn't just anecdotal. So I think women in leadership is hugely important, and I'm delighted to have the chance to kind of work on a couple of different bits in European Movement on that. And I think, as I say, we all need to continue working for it. And yourself, Maria, other female politicians, you're champions of this. And it isn't easy, and it isn't easy to be a politician for anyone. But I think we all have a lot of work to do to create a space for young women to say, that's a career I'd love to do,
Yeah, and actually, it's funny. Just before, so for full transparency, we're recording this conversation the day after St. Bridget's Day, so in bulk. And
Lola Bridget.
Just last night, we in our local town of Headford, Solstice Arts Group had gathered a number of women together to share stories, talk about passionate and female leaders, to talk about change and the activism piece. And there is a bubbling energy of change and demand for change, I think, of women and allies of women. But we do all have a personal responsibility of activism of that. Armchair activism only brings us so far. And then the world of social media and the platforms of it allows us to feel like we're contributing. But when we get up off the armchair and actually get out, is a very different requirement and need. And I think a lot of people believe it's just Ireland. It's not, waves of change are happening left and right of us, and we are influenced by left and right of us. And I don't mean on the political landscape, I mean geopolitics. So what happened in the United States, I'm an Obama baby, as I like and proudly say, but in 2016, I think for me, I put my hand up and really wanted to get involved in some shape or form, because for me, I was on the armchair of activism and I wasn't actually making move. And all of us, I think, get a call, and whether we hear it or not is up to our community to make sure we're moving together. But I think I'm still in both phase here as I say that. But to your point, we all have a personal and a collective requirement to make that change, that you don't just see 40%, you actually see 50% representation. And when things like pictures of the COVID-19 pandemic announcements at the start are not just men in suits, and I say that as a party member of Fine Gael in government, that is not the message we send out. When we talk about
those
equality.
Images, those pictures. I remember I worked for a radio station and I saw an image like that, and it was a community station and there were 3 men, and I just said, do you realize that little girls see that and internalize that, and they say, that beautiful picture of Michelle Obama and the little girl looking at her, it's that idea of, I can be that, I see myself in that. And that goes for so many different people, like young migrants in Ireland, people with disabilities, like people have to see themselves represented, or they don't see that they can go into that world,
Yeah, and the shattering of the glass ceiling, that message is not good enough anymore. And we stand on the shoulders of the women who built us to where we are, and we can't let them crumble. We need to continue forward. I think we could have a whole other conversation about that one, Lisa. But from EMI, from all the work with EMI, and I hope everybody who's listening and watching from the conversation there just sees the breadth of work that is done. It's not just one facet of pushing out research and having conversations. There's so much systematic change that's going on because of EMI in trying to influence and educate and really support Irish citizens seeing the European Union as a home, and vice versa. We talked a little bit. Obviously, we covered the Irish language, but I grazed over it, and I wanted to just come back as one of our final last 2 questions, if that's okay. Irish became the official EU language. I want to put my hand up here and say I'm embarrassed with a mother from the Bhreithimh, from Derry Dara in County Galway. I have Plumos Irish, as I like to say, a cúpla focal, but not enough to feel confident and comfortable in myself to stand in the Parliament, and that is going to change before I leave in 2024. That's a promise. But what was your reaction to the news that we had officially become an EU language? And you mentioned in terms of the EU, the work and the multiple of jobs that are out there, and I'd love to just because I know you do a lot of work on this too, and as you said, personally and professionally, but I'd love to just hear a little bit of piece on that, and how excited you were that it has officially become the language.
Yeah, well, the awesome downer. I was over the moon, and it was such, as I say, a boost, I think, to Irish speakers and to, even organizations like ourselves who try to do our bit. Like we have one page on our website that's through Irish. We've done a couple of podcasts through Irish. We've done a couple of events. One of those NASC CSO events we ran purely through Irish. One of our Conference on the Future of Europe events was through Gaeilge. So we're here trying to kind of work and bring that in. And it isn't easy, having 1 or 2 colleagues maybe translating documents, and our CEO Noelle as well as a fluent speaker and joining in. And that idea of, it is an extra piece of work, and you do need to support people when they are taking those initiatives. So it was a great support, and it was great to see. And, I think you're referencing there our work on sort of graduate jobs in Europe, and we have a huge body of work around that, around promoting the EU as a place for young graduates and people to go and work. And we always say that's one of our most visited pages every month of every year is our jobs and traineeships and our graduate jobs in Europe page. People are just so interested, it seems, whether they're people with Irish, with languages. young people in Ireland in particular are so interested in the EU, I think, as an opportunity. And I mean, there's always more work that can be done, but there's a huge amount of work being done. Sometimes people say, oh, I haven't heard about that. But, there are organizations, like we're a 10, 11 person NGO. We can only do so much, but, we release a jobs and traineeships list every week. So if people want to know about all of the opportunities that are out there, they can sign up to that. And we talk about Gaeilge. My colleague Emer Vrin in the Commission representation in Ireland does a huge amount of work on promoting Irish language careers, other careers with Irish, and lots of other things as well. Then, of course, the permanent representation of Ireland to the EU in Brussels do huge work, the DFA. There's so many different organizations working to promote these jobs. And I think, as I say, we can always do more, but like we're doing, for example, one-to-one clinics with people every year or every week to support them in their applications. We do talks with universities and colleges, and there's a great interest there from the universities, from the careers offices to, about just the breadth of opportunity that's there. And it's an exciting opportunity too. Like I had lots of friends over the years who went to Strasbourg or Brussels or further afield to work for embassies, and they really had such an interesting, diverse experience. Like they were traveling right across the continent every weekend. They were meeting people from all different backgrounds, more so than you would in Ireland. So I always encourage anyone I know who's in their early 20s, I always say, just go now, do a few years even, and enjoy it, because there's such opportunity there, and there are constantly new jobs coming up, loads with the Irish language, I'm delighted to say. So I always say, if people have a bit of Irish, to really push that forward. Maybe you just spoke it in the home, maybe you went to a Gael school, maybe you did it in college. You don't have to have done all of those things to apply. You just have to be really, I think, passionate and comfortable with your Irish to give those applications a go, to appreciating they can be a minefield in ways too. But yeah.
But to your point, I think it's every Thursday you'll throw up the job postings, because I know I have posted roles with you all, which has been fantastic, because it's not just about those that follow you on social media that see it. It's a wider collective audience. I think it's 1,900 internships and traineeships through all the institutions every 6 months. It's not just speaking language and translating in the Parliament or the Commission or Council. It's actually the legislative work too. And that's also based in Strasbourg, as you said, Brussels and Luxembourg. So there's so much opportunity there. But yeah, so check out the job postings. We'll make sure to include a link within this, so that everybody knows where to go. And to your own lived experience of going to the United States to teach Irish, I think is what you'd said. There's so much on the doorstep through the passion of our native mother tongue. Finally, because I know
all languages, people who speak any second language, or rather say if they speak Polish in the home or something like that, we really encourage people to use the language skills that they have, and not to be intimidated by thinking they need a degree or a certain qualification, but to really, put forward those languages. And it isn't just translation, as you say, Maria. Sometimes that can be a misconception. There are so many opportunities for people with languages, and it's really worth looking at the broad spectrum of them there.
Yeah, and I got to give credit to the European Union as a whole institution. So if you come with 2 languages, Irish and English, you have opportunity to explore with training and support other languages. And when you compare us to other EU countries like Belgium in particular, having 4 or 5 languages is not unheard of. A lot do. So our part in increasing our own mother tongue, as well as celebrate, to your point, the many other languages that we have in our country, be it if you're conversational, or you just need a little bit more confidence to work it into work, then there's so much opportunity to do that. And that's not us plummossing over the fact that it's super hard. It is, but there's a multiple of resources there to support, and that you feel confident and comfortable. Watch this space with my own Irish language. My mother says she won't canvass for me in 2024 if I don't get my Gaeilge together. So there's the closest to home in terms of required work. But I apologize, Lisa, because I've kept you online for a little bit too long, because I know you have a hectic day. But I didn't want to leave this chat without having some conversation on the Conference on the Future of Europe and the fact that we're in the EU Year of Youth. I know you have an in-person event on the 24th of February in Galway based on the Conference on Future of Europe. Is there anything else? What's coming down the pipeline? How do we get in touch? Where do we go? And love to hear the final hard pieces of work that you all do to make the EU.
So we're
I
doing
often think of EMI and I say I'm Irish and I'm European, or I'm European and I'm Irish, and that's thanks to the credit and the work that you all do in EMI.
Yeah, we're doing lots on the conference, so I won't go into a huge amount of detail because sure, it's all up there on the website and they can get in touch with us. But everyone is welcome to be a part of this conversation, and we would love to hear from anyone. In particular, I know sometimes there's been a drive for more women to be part of conversations about the conference. We've been delighted to see lots of representation of women at our events, thankfully. And, we're doing events, as you say, and we're actually doing events right across the country in person, our first few events in person throughout February and partly into March. So it's worth checking in with us and seeing what's going on maybe in your own area or which events you could come to. Everyone is welcome, and we'd love to hear from everyone. So they can check in with us at conference@europeanmovement.ie if they'd like to attend or learn more. And then, of course, Maria, the multilingual platform online, future.europa.eu. I always get that wrong, but there's a space there to input your ideas, your thoughts at any point through any language. And there's a fabulous section of that, Trí Gaeilge in Irish. So I'd really encourage people as well who speak Irish to input their ideas there. But yeah, we've had some really positive engagement on the conference, and we're looking forward to bringing people back together to have a chat in a room with some sandwiches and tea and coffee and all the rest of it. Because I think
I've never been more excited for the I've never been more excited for the triangle sandwich.
Ham and butter, that's it.
Yeah, and the fact that you're in energy again of people versus, I think remote working has done its job, and I hope some form of it may continue in terms of a hybrid model. But I'm really looking forward to getting back out there and really meeting people and having those conversations that we so desperately need to have about where our future is within the European Union, and fingers crossed we're all moving towards that ambitious EU. So our peace project, long may it continue in all its forms, with all its languages and cultures.
And I think it should be said that we've had lots of, really, really good conversations with people online, and I don't think we should ever discredit those conversations we had with the conference with NOSC CSO last year. Like, they were hugely beneficial. We had some great outcomes. We got some great submissions for people. So for anyone who took part in our stuff online, just to say they were wonderful. And I think people really engaged, even though it was difficult to do so from home. And I think we also reached maybe a broader spectrum of people, and, people in every corner of the country who maybe wouldn't as easily come into a city. So we were delighted with that. And our excellent conference team, Rory, Cueva, Murin, and our events person, Kieran, they're doing stellar work to bring these in-person events back. But I think there's a lot to be said for the online events too,
Happy balance for all. Yeah. Lisa, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for the time. Is there anything I did not ask or did not cover on behalf of EMI?
I think we've covered absolutely everything.
Well, I'm so grateful that you stayed with us for as long as you did. I know you're incredibly busy, but I'm super grateful always to the EMI team that work incredibly hard at making my role as an MEP so much easier, because we can signpost and have good conversations with Blue Schools, with various civil society organizations, with people on the street about the fact that we are one of the most pro-European countries for what is, in comparison, a small member state, and we're very passionate about making that increase more, and that's in great credit to you guys and your support at EMI. So thank you. Fingers crossed, next time I have a conversation, we could do this a few minutes through a couple of words of Irish. And I really look forward to seeing you all in person again very soon. I will be posting everything EMI related under this chat and with this chat, but check out European Movement Ireland folks for various resources. And thank you again, Lisa. I appreciate it. And say hello to all the team for us.
I will do. Gur míle maith agad, Maria.
Thanks.